Sorry, Karen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, okay, so we're just waiting.
Yes. I,
Welcome back. Pleased to see you again. I hope you have enjoyed the roundtable session. Before entering in our last panel of the day, please take a look at AFFM strategy video.
Africa has a quarter of the world's arable land, but only produces 10% of its agricultural output. The low productivity of staple crops makes African agriculture uncompetitive. The continent's food import bill has more than tripled, reaching about $35 billion a year. The low level of productivity is because the average fertilizer consumption in Africa is still lagging at 20 kilos of nutrients per hectare, which is far behind the Abuja Declaration target of 50 kilos per hectare and the world average fertilizer consumption of 135 kilos per hectare. To close the fertilizer use gap and contribute to creating sustainable food systems in Africa, the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism, a special fund managed by the African Development Bank, adopted a new strategy that has the ambition of accelerating Africa's agricultural development agenda during the period 2022 to 2028. To this end, the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism will prioritize these key areas: access to finance, leverage financial resources via innovative partnerships to support the fertilizer value chain, fertilizer policy, support the development of viable policy reforms to improve production, trade, and utilization of fertilizer, technical assistance, facilitate smallholder farmers' access to inputs and tailored support.
The new AFFM strategy is a very ambitious plan that, if fully supported, will contribute in the transformation of the agricultural landscape in Africa.
These new priority areas will facilitate better access to financing for agricultural SMEs in 15 African countries. More specifically, 16 million smallholder farmers will be able to use at least 50 kilos per hectare of fertilizer nutrient in the countries targeted to increase their yield productivity by 35%. The targeted smallholder farmers will use at least 2 million metric tons of fertilizer and other inputs.
Our new strategy will significantly contribute to empowering our smallholder farmers. It will enable access to affordable and quality input at the right time, equip them with the know-how they need to use input appropriately, and facilitate access to markets.
With the support of its partners, the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism will mobilize $300 million to support the fertilizer value chain. The resources will be used as credit guarantees and grants to mitigate agro-input suppliers' risks, leverage private resources, and sponsor the design of solid fertilizer-related policies.
Fertilizers are important for the transformation of African agriculture. The African Fertilizer Financing Mechanism has provided access to fertilizers for more than 500,000 Tanzanian farmers. Please join us in the effort to increase agricultural productivity on the African continent.
In collaboration with different partners, including development organizations, research institutions, and technical service providers, AFFM will provide holistic support to input suppliers, hub agro dealers, and farmers. Join us and invest in AFFM's new roadmap to boost African food productivity. And let's put more smiles on our farmers' faces.
The panel 3 is about Feed Africa and the role of all stakeholders in the value chain. This session will provide the opportunity to discuss how effective instruments, multi-stakeholder cooperation, new ways of distribution, and technology solutions can help us develop new approach to deliver on these commitments and scale up solutions. To address this pressing matter, I am glad to welcome Vincent Castel, Regional Sector Manager, Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry from the African Development Bank, Marie-Claire Kalien-Gabo, Coordinator, Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism, and Omri Van Zyl, CEO of Agri-SA Enterprise. And the conversation will be moderated by Joseph Russik, Head of Market Intelligence, African Fertilizer and Agribusiness Partnership. Joseph, the stage is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's getting late, and I hope we can get started with this session. Our focus today will be to discuss the role of all stakeholders in agricultural value chains, particularly within the framework of the AFDB's Feed Africa, to achieve at scale the development goals and objectives of increasing agricultural productivity and production, reducing poverty and malnutrition. This theme has been recurring, consistent, and running through from the first presentation by Her Excellency, the Commissioner of Agriculture today. We also listened to the ministers of agriculture of Rwanda, Malawi, Uganda, and Zambia. Again, this theme kept on repeating under the rubric of public-private partnerships in agriculture. Why? This is the mother and father of all discussions today. And the reason is often in 101 economic classes, we learn under the new Keynesian economics, we learn that underdevelopment is really a case of failures of coordination. It's a coordination failure. Different players along the value chains are not coordinating what they're doing, their investments, their activities, their operations. And in particular, we need to focus on our case, upstream players, those who are supplying research and technology development into the system, technology transfer, extension, agricultural input, production, processing, manufacture, import, trade, logistics, be seeds, fertilizers, farm equipment, and pesticides, and as well as focus on on-farm production and downstream on-farm output collectors, aggregators, off-takers, transporters, storers, processors, manufacturers, wholesale distributors, supermarkets, retailers, exporters, and importers. We'll hear from our panelists their perspectives and insights relating to three questions. Number one, what are the current approaches that are being used in different contexts to engage all stakeholders to deliver the Feed Africa initiative's results? What is working? Where? For whom? How? At what cost? And what is not working well? And based on your insights and perspectives, what are the technological, institutional, market, and policy innovations that can be used to improve stakeholders' roles and delivery of Feed Africa's goals and objectives? If we've got time, I'll come to another one of strategies of Feed Africa going forward. Over to you. Let me start with Marie-Claire. Can you kindly provide us with your thinking on these questions and what we've learned and what experiences and what we need going forward?
Yes, thank you very much, Joseph. This morning we were talking about AFFM, but let me start by mentioning that the AFFM goal is actually to increase, to assist African countries in increasing their agricultural productivity and smallholder farmers' income. So with that, our mandate is actually to contribute to achieving the target of fertilizer application of 50 kilograms per nutrient, of nutrient per hectare, as mandated by the Abuja Declaration. So this can actually be done by making fertilizer available, affordable, and appropriately used by smallholder farmers. So about the question about our approaches. So FFM have adopted the value chain approach because it provides actually the opportunities for high impact intervention in a dynamic market exercising demand pool. As you've heard this morning, most of the actors in fertilizer value chain, especially in fertilizer distribution, are SMEs. They include aggregators, agro dealers, importers, wholesalers, and they all have the main challenge, which is access to finance. So FFM, in order to sustainably address this financing gap, we focus on provisioning of credit guarantees to support input distribution to smallholder farmers. FFM was actually operational in 2019, and starting from 2018, and starting from 2019, we initiated the implementation of 2 trade credit guarantees worth 5.6 million to backstop the financing of fertilizer distribution in Tanzania and Nigeria. So with these projects, today we really, this morning you have heard about the success we had in Tanzania, which is really, which was achieved actually between September 2020 and September 2021, where about 48,000 metric tons of fertilizer were distributed to smallholder farmers, with a value of around $20 million, which this actually has made IFFM guarantee 10 times a leverage. And we have a similar program actually in Nigeria, where through 7 blenders and 35 hub agro dealers, the program has facilitated blending and distribution of at least 30,000 metric tons of fertilizer with a value of 9 million. This again makes a FFM guarantee a leverage of 4 times our guarantee. So, but however, in Nigeria, FFM and FAP, who are collaborating on those 2 projects, have also involved financial institution actually to leverage on FFM guarantee, which is actually kind of a drop in the ocean in the Nigeria market. So other the 2 programs, the participants in the program, blenders, agro dealers, retail agro dealers, and suppliers were supported with capacity building on business practice, business management practices, good agricultural practices, etc. So this year, in collaboration with OCP Africa, we are implementing a similar program in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. It's really an innovative blended finance in form of trade credit guarantee, which is this is 4 million. It will allow 430,000 farmers to have access to input, but also capacity building, and will allow the increase of farmers' yield of at least 35% by the next 3 years. But you talked about what doesn't work. So what I think doesn't work so far, as I mentioned, the FFM guarantee is actually kind of a drop. It's really not, alone cannot really address the financing gap in the fertilizer distribution. And that's why we want to have more resources to scale up our program. But we have also experienced a kind of fluid operating environment in the fertilizer sector in different countries. And this requires actually that countries develop fertilizer strategies and put in place kind of policies to support national capacity for quality fertilizer production, distribution, and control. So with this, I think I responded to your first question, which has like kind of 3 sub-questions. Thank you, and I look forward to your further questions. Thank you. You are muted.
Thank you. Yep, that's a really interesting case you've discussed there of the AFFM investment in Nigeria, Tanzania, moving to Ghana and Ivory Coast. Let me turn to Vincent. Again, can we go back to the loaded question? And hopefully we hear your perspective and insights as to what is working and how we move forward.
Okay. Just tell me, Joseph, at the beginning, I had the impression that we had to answer the 3 questions at once. Is it the case? You want me to answer the first question or all the 3 questions? I'm ready to do the whole.
This is dynamic.
This is dynamic.
Just do what you can.
I can talk forever. I can talk
the more
forever.
the better.
I just wanted to know if you wanted me to answer 1 or the 3, and I can do the 3 if you want. Well, the first one, I would say, was about the Feed Africa strategy, our approach to value chain and stakeholder coordination. Well, I think that the stakeholder coordination part, when we address value chain in all countries of Africa, is one of the most important and difficult tasks to achieve. You know, at the bank, if we look at the Feed Africa strategy, we have, I think what is important is to go back to the strategy itself. And when we look at our strategy, initially, we had identified 2 main pillars, I would say. One pillar was about the social role that agriculture is playing on the continent. And it relates, of course, to livelihoods, to income generation, to food security. And the second thing, which often was ignored in the development process, was, of course, that agriculture is a business in itself, and it should be treated as a business. So within our Feed Africa strategy, we have adopted, of course, a value chain approach, and I'm going to give some examples of that in the various countries. But when it comes to defining an approach and trying to organize the various stakeholders, sometimes it's difficult to have always this value chain approach, and we have to focus. So in some of the countries, we have to focus at the beginning of the chain, and we focus on production. And this is what I was beginning. This is our pillar 1. Sometimes we have to focus at the end of the chain. Relates more to business, processing, marketing. And we have a number of initiatives to implement this approach. When we look at the production part, we have elaborated the TAT initiative. And the TAT initiative, which stands for Technology for Actual African Actual Transformation, I think its objectives are to double productivity on actual land over the years to come. And to do so, it's all about technologies, but it's all about stakeholder coordination. If you want to do this, I mean, you need to, of course, provide the right seeds. And seeds is, if agriculture is a car, seeds is the engine and fertilizer is the fuel. So you need to have the right engine. And to get the right engine, here you need that coordination. First of all, you need to work with a number of institutions that have this know-how, that have the right seats on the African continent. And we have defined here a number of compacts for the various value chains, where these players are research institutions, but as well the private sector, are here to support the delivery of these improved seeds, improved varieties, so that we can boost productivity. The same comes with fertilizer. And I think here you have already discussed that a lot over the last sessions. And putting the focus on this, through the TAT initiative, we have had fantastic results over the last few years. Let me take an example. We have implemented that initiative in 27 countries, and thanks to that network of research institutions, input providers, and so on and so forth, the private sector, we have increased, for example, if I take high iron bean, we have increased productivity by 113%, where we intervened, with an average of 62.5% across all commodities. If I take the example of Sudan, where we focused on wheat, in our program, initially production was in 2015, 300,000 metric tons for the 2015 wheat cropping season. And in 2020, these had increased 1.1 million metric tons. In Kenya, we supported 28 seed companies in producing about 8,000 million tons of drought-tolerant varieties that were supplied to almost 800,000 farmers. If we look at this high iron beans compact, we have implemented that in 8 countries: Burundi, DRC, Kenya, Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And we have achieved our targets, exceeded our targets, as I was saying, by 63% in terms of productivity gains. And that is at the beginning. That is at the beginning of the chain. At the end of the chain, we have another initiative, which is the special agro-industrial zones. And here the idea is to work with the public sector, to work with the private sector, but also to work with the producers, so that in actual production zones which have difficult access to processing infrastructure, processing facilities, we establish this kind of SEPZ structure. And here the public sector and the private sector are working together so that the public facilities are being used by the private sector to process what is being produced by the region, the various producers across these regions. It requires, of course, a lot of coordination, because if you don't coordinate with the private sector, you are developing infrastructure for nothing. And these infrastructure, they're not being used. You need to work with the producer and the private sector together, because the private sector is going to come if they have a reliable source of agricultural products. It won't be one shot, it has to be over time. You need to work with the public sector, so the policy is right, so that we can establish the contracts between the producers and also the private sector. And we have implemented that SAPZ strategy in a number of countries. Recently, for example, this year, we are going to do one in Nigeria. We are going to do one in DRC. Let me finish that. These are, I was saying, when we decide to intervene for one reason or another at the beginning or the end of the chain, sometimes we try to address value chains in one go. And here we decide to focus. You cannot do everything. So we decide to focus on one specific value chain, and we work throughout that value chain from producers to processors. And we work with the government to basically establish the right policy framework so that value chain can flourish. And when we focus on that, we of course focus on value chains of importance, either from a social point of view or from an economic point of view. Let me take the example of Chad, for example. It was a very interesting approach because we've targeted here the livestock sector. And in the case of the livestock sector, we discovered that there were two commodities that had totally different, I would say, a role to play in the agri sector. The dairy value chain was mainly to improve food security and nutrition in the country. Why did we decide to do that? Because we realized that, in fact, the dairy value chain was not sufficiently structured. Some dairy products were being imported to meet the local needs, while the country enjoyed one of the largest stock in Africa. So the issue here was to develop the value chain so that we can supply the country and the families and the kids with reliable source of proteins and of good quality. We also worked on the red meat, and here we worked with the private sector. The idea, what we realized is that if we were in a position to design adequate slaughterhouse processing facilities and had the right institutions to certify the meat, we would be in a position to export this meat and make a new source of income from the country, especially in terms of foreign exchange. So these are two examples where we decided to focus on in one project on two very specific value chain and trying to address stakeholder coordination across that value chain, but here focusing on very specific development objectives. Maybe I will have spoken enough. I will pass the floor and answer question number 2 afterwards.
Thank you. Again, a classic set of interventions, initiatives, approaches that the bank is pursuing, very different, innovative from what we've seen in the past. But let me now go to Omri. Omri, maybe we can fit in the 10 minutes before your deadline. Okay, is at 5 o'clock. It's 6 o'clock my time, 5 o'clock your time. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you, colleagues. It's great talking to you. Just a little bit of background. So I've done quite a lot of African strategies for multinational companies and in-country companies. These include in the chemical industry, the likes of Syngenta, Monsanto, Bayer, Land O'Lakes, looked at acquisitions on the continent, looked at various value chains, and looked at the banking systems, looked at the input finance systems, looked at all of that stuff. So perhaps I'm going to just start with, and this is a generalization, with what we can do better. And then I'm going to focus on the opportunity, and then I'm going to talk about the future of agriculture and what is happening, where it's going to, etc. So if you do a due diligence, you do that on a business premise, you look at it from a business return on investment perspective. And I think generally that's been something that's been absent in a lot of African countries. The return on investment, the return on capital, whether it's equity or debt or whatever the situation is there. So what we found doesn't work is that basically, by and large, the African infrastructure system is broken. The public sector does not have the ability to actually fix that. There's not enough tax revenue to actually fix that problem. Obviously, we know problems like corruption and these things are kind of endemic in Africa and very problematic. The other big problem is, apart from the fact that we don't really have agro-processing capacity to the level that we could have on the continent, is our transport and harbor systems are broken. You know, you cannot, if you sit in China or you sit in America and you buy a bottle of tomato sauce, you don't really care where it comes from. It must just get there, you know. So and the other thing that we lack here is scale. It's scale enough to bring serious capital into the continent. So what we've done is we've actually studied the correlation between venture capital funds and what they invested in the world, because that by and large determines the future of the world that we'll live in. So by and large, the biggest bulk of venture capital funding goes into America, into the Internet of Things, into automation, into services, you know, that type of stuff. So futuristic initiatives like a future Alibaba or a future Tesla or a future SpaceX, or, you know, these type of things, Microsoft, Facebook, these guys are, that is the investment norm. Very few of the global venture capital investments actually go into agri-food systems. You get in Europe, you know, Nestle and Yara and Mondelez, and in Asia, there's a little bit of it going in there. In America, it's PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, but nothing compares more or less to the kind of size that the rest get. Which means that there's not that much going directly into the food and fiber systems in terms of venture capital investment. What the investment goes into is into technology, AI formulation, those type of things, where you know that is the norm. That's something that's going to shape the future. So getting back to Africa and the specific you know, fertilizer and other opportunities that we have here. The first thing I think that is a massive challenge in Africa is productivity, and I think Vincent alluded to that in the terms of, you know, seeds, access to fertilizer. I mean, even here in South Africa, we see a massive blockage at the moment in the agrochemical industry with regards to fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. And there's a variety of reasons because of COVID, the container movements, in the China ports. We're seeing fertilizer prices have doubled in this country, in South Africa, the past year. And I'm sure, you know, so where you gain on productivity, you lose on price. And it's as simple as that is. What we're also seeing is that in terms of the European Green Deal, there's a lot of emphasis being placed on zero carbon emissions. You know, most of the very big companies in the world said by 2050, zero carbon emissions. So that also has an impact on the end consumer. Talking about the future, the question is, where do we want to be? You know, I mean, most of us live in Africa. We understand the problems that we have. But the question is, where do we want to be as a continent? Where do we position ourselves in terms of agricultural output? And we always start strategically at the end. We say, listen, you talk about the value chain. If you say you want to, let's say, quadruple agriculture output in the next 5 years, which is very possible. If you say you want to do that, then you have to work back and say, okay, how do I finance value chains? Because primary production finance is not working in Africa. You have to finance the whole value chain. Oftentimes you start by the off-taker and you start with the market. That's where you start. And then you work backwards. Just from a production perspective, it is extremely difficult to finance, you know, so many smallholder farmers and get the money back. Another thing that's a fundamental problem on the continent is, well, it's access to capital, it's bankability, and it is insurance. Those are all things that play into the larger productivity picture of African agriculture. So what is going to happen into the future? There is such a big emphasis being placed on the Internet of Things, you know, technology interventions that might change the value chains, not might, it will change the value chain chains of the food and fiber sector. And it's already, talking about South Africa, it's already happened. Most of the big retailers here, you get an app, you order your produce on an app, 60 minutes later, they deliver it at your door. That is how the Internet of Things and technology and artificial intelligence is going to change. Now, I see that as an opportunity for Africa, because that means that we can bridge some of the very expensive gaps that we have in terms of infrastructure, market access, and all of that. So I've always been, and we're working on it at the moment, is looking at a virtual commodity exchange. I spoke about the AGOA agreement the other day. America, which is arguably the largest or second largest consumer market in the world, imports less than 2% of its foodstuffs from Africa, less than 2%, with preferential non-tariff barriers in the AGOA agreement. So there's a massive opportunity to bring that technology in here, create a commodity exchange that organizes price formulation, as well as volumes and exchanges, and basically use the Internet of Things to fire that value chains up, to the bottom and to the top, and create additional capital into that system so that we can actually fund the farming and the input activities and the processing activities that we must. So that's that's the big picture, and that's what I see is going to happen. And the question is just, how do we participate as Africans in that process and make sure that we, have strategic targets that we can, shoot the lights out and become the breadbasket of the future of the world.
Thank you. Again, for a very futuristic view and how we need to work backwards and get our stakeholder coordination in place. I still recall reading an assessment by Strive Masiwa, who owns one of the largest mobile phone companies. And he made the argument that in 1995, if I had told you that by 2020, 70% of the households in rural Africa would own a phone, when not only maybe 5% had ever had a phone ring in their lives, you would say, I'm crazy. But guess today, phone ownership in Tanzania, according to the last Living Standards Measurement Survey data, 71%. Again, prediction that in the next 10 years, 20 years, the bulk of households in Africa will have electricity. They have solar power. And again, so again, I say you are pushing us and taking us and closing the circle. Now, if I can go back, Marie-Claire, maybe we return now to so what we've heard, we've listened, and we've heard you. So what is the strategy? I think a little bit of that came out in the video. So it's really a short summary for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Joseph. Well, before even maybe I talk about our strategy, let me maybe just briefly speak about innovations. We have just heard about ICT, which is really also important in input distribution, but also that allows farmers to definitely be able to have access to finance and pay their input very easily using their phone. We heard about what happens in Rwanda with Bank of Kigali. So this is one of the technology that really need to be brought at scale. So I believe that we have a number of technology that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but rather we need to bring those technology at scale. Regarding access to input, for example, I think the input subsidy programs are really important that allow countries which have the lowest fertilizer application rates, because not only it allows partnership between government and private sector in work collaborative action to avail input to farmers, but also it serves as an incentive to farmers to use the input in the required quantities. again, I want to mention that the source of financing for smallholder farmers actually is access to markets. And that's why we at FFM, we really promote we promote this program we are implementing with OCP Africa and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, because it connects all the dots. It allows farmers to have access to input at credit, and also it allows farmers to be supported during in-season, pre-season, in-season, and even post-harvest periods to ensure that they use the input appropriately and guarantee the expected yield. So with that, they also farmers are connected to off-takers to get to take off their agricultural production, but also to agro-processing companies to do the processing. So that's why we think this is really also an innovation that really needs to be brought at scale to ensure that we get the productivity we need and also feed Africa. So regarding the strategy, personally, I could summarize Feed Africa simply in quality, quantity, and nutritious food sustainably available to farmers, to people of Africa. So this morning, before even this panel, you have just heard about our FFM strategic plan for the next 7 years, 22-27. With this strategy, we intend to mobilize actually $300 million to facilitate access to 16 million farmers in at least 15 countries. So it is really ambitious, but it's also commensurate with the increasing need in the fertilizer financing. So it is structured around three main pillars. The first one being strengthening the fertilizer sector through access to finance, as we continue saying that the financing is a huge gap. The second is to support development of viable policy and improve trade, access, and appropriate utilization of fertilizer. And the third pillar is to facilitate smallholder farmers access to inputs and technical assistance. So we use an integrated approach to propose solutions that impact the whole agricultural value chain through capital investment and facilitation. So we are also trying to, we strive to build on partnerships. We know that FFM alone cannot achieve this. That's why we want to collaborate with different partners, including AFDB, all development banks, private sector, including fertilizer companies, financial institutions, all the stakeholders, government, to ensure that we maximize, maximize opportunity and propose sustainable solution that will create synergies and for an efficient use of funds that would be injected in the fertilizer sector. So we've heard that this morning that the price of fertilizer are really increasing. And also we understood that though we have some successful, we just heard from Vincent about what Feed Africa is achieving, but still over 300 million people are malnourished. So we need more and more food. Thus, it's really imperative to increase agricultural production and productivity, but also while maintaining environmental and social safeguard. But again, since farmers own land, we need to address land issues. So we have to discuss about the access to vital agricultural input are really important to increase that productivity we are talking about. So there is no way you can really feed Africa if we are not able to feed our soils, depleted soils first. So this 7-year strategy, we intend to work with all stakeholders for the promotion of adequate use of fertilizer and promote the application of those We call them 4 famous R: the right product, the right price, the right time, and the right place. So farmers have to get input closer. So that's what the strategy is trying is intend to achieve. So we are now actually therefore calling upon all stakeholders in the sector to financially support this strategy, either directly or financial supported directly through co-financing, hybrid financing, leverage, etc. So I would end by asking all the stakeholders, all the partners to join us in making this true, in implementing this strategic plan, and put more smiles to our smallholder farmers' faces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. I think although we started late, it would be good if we can now begin to summarize, pull our thoughts together, so that we start winding up this session. Before, if I come back to you, Vincent, and what are your final views, actionable insights as we go forward? In particular, we've got a very futuristic perspective that shows us where we're headed, or where we could be headed, and what technology is likely to do to us. You are very practical on the ground, trying to move African farmers to this. And any thoughts, thinking, what we, with particularly respect to role of stakeholders in a world where the infrastructure is tough, there's corruption, although Asia lifted itself out of poverty with even more corruption than what we are seeing in Africa. So again, anyway, I'll hand over to you with that suggesting answers.
You know, I have in fact a very simple answer to that, and at the bank we have some initiatives to look toward that direction, and it relates to what Henry was saying at some point. The sector and the youth in Africa is of course ahead of us, and we are always trying to catch up the events, especially when it comes to the use of new technologies. So there are 2 facts that I think are extremely important. The first thing is that by 2050, and sometimes 2050 seems to be like, you know, very futuristic, but people tend to forget that 2040 and 2050 are as close to us as the beginning of the year 2000 and the 1990s. So it's very close. It's very close. And by 2050, there will be close to 900 million Africans that will be below the age of 25, meaning that they are not yet born. And Africa is, in fact, the growth pole, is going to become the growth pole of the world. And that the current youth and the youth that is yet to come is going to be born in a world that it will be, I'm going to say, very well versed into these new technologies. And technologies that we are yet to discover and that we do not fully understand as of today. And these technologies, they are going to shape up and transform the agri sector. And they are going to help us to achieve something that you have just, pinpoint at the very beginning. These technologies are going to be used to improve stakeholder coordination and change radically the way these agri value chains are being structured. It all started, in my humble opinion, with 2 phenomena that have already transformed agriculture in Africa. One was financial inclusion. And we saw these banks, you know, on the phone with the apps in East Africa popping up, and then after that, being developed in a number of countries on the continent. The second trend initially to me was this idea of market intelligence, using the phone to know where to sell your produce, to get the right price. And it was a fantastic eyes opener for a lot of the small producers to realize that there were sometimes some reports that they had to travel just 20 kilometers more, and they would make us twice much money than in their local market. And what I see now and what I observe, and you know, to support that use, I mean, to support digitalization, we have what we call Digital Agriculture Initiative, but we are also promoting a lot the agripreneurs on the continent. And when we read these projects being promoted by these agripreneurs, you totally see what it's going to be like tomorrow, because they have these new ideas that are popping up and they are using these smart technologies, and you totally see how it's going to transform the sector and increase stakeholder coordination. One, by opening trade across countries, across regions within a country and across countries, to develop knowledge management, to help producers understand how they can get the best inputs. What are these best inputs? What are the crops that they have to produce under certain types of conditions? To certify the products. You know, I was discussing very recently with someone that is now promoting on the African development continent the use of blockchains to certify African produce so that can meet certain standards and be exported to markets that were impossible to reach before, like Europe. So for me, it's going to be the future, and it's very important because at the beginning you mentioned that these were some of the classical things that we have been discussing about productivity, processing, and everything. I think the real challenge for all of us is, while we try to catch up and support the development of the value chain through indeed practical solutions, trying to address long-term issues when it comes to productivity and transformation. But at the same time, how do we help youth and the private sector to rethink agriculture so that we will be ahead of the curve when it comes to the use of new technologies and transform the sector? I think that's my 2 cents to conclude.
Thank you very much. And Omri, you know, this is like a Delphi round robin type of brainstorming sessions in which Marie Claire does contribute a lot to what you have said before and stimulates your thinking about the next issue. And so does Vincent. Again, turning to you, any parting words of wisdom about where Feed Africa program with respect to the role of stakeholders ought to be headed, given the future and the futuristic you were talking about? Any summary, and then we end, and you're free to go.
Thank you. Joseph, I always say there's 2 things when you work in Africa, right? The first is you cannot eat potential. You cannot eat potential. You have to create it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. You cannot hope that your world is going to change, or our world is going to change, or we are going to feed ourselves in the future. There's only 2 food secure countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Only 2 of all the countries that we have. Got the longest river in the world and the 2nd largest river in the world on this continent. So we're going to have to put our hands in our own pockets and make it happen. And it sounds maybe esoterical, but that is, while we are thinking and debating things, the world are moving ahead at a pace that you cannot believe. So we need to form part of that solution, and we have to create it ourselves. So that, in short, is my parting shot.
Thank you. This has been a very dynamic and fruitful exchange. Learning how the value chain is a framework in which we can place or hang the different stakeholders and coordinate and get to do something that then delivers on the Feed Africa initiative, the goals and objectives, which you read any policy of any country in Africa, the same goals, the same objectives are laid out there. So it's all our collective goals in Africa. And we've laid out a number of technologies, technological innovations, institutional innovations, policy innovations, which will help take us there. I would like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a very good session. And over to you, I'll hand over to the administrators to close the session.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was a very rich discussion. No doubts that Fertilizer has a strategic role to play in order to meet the Feed Africa goals. As Marie-Claire said, we can't feed Africa if we can't feed ourselves. So it is the purpose of FFM to federate the stakeholders in order to deliver on these commitments. We will now ask our roundtable rapporteurs to give up a wrap-up of their roundtable. So regarding, when it comes to roundtable 1, I will call Atsuko Toda, Director of the Agricultural Finance and Rural Infrastructure Development from the African Development Bank. Atsuko, the floor is yours. The roundtable 1 was about the PPPs. So maybe if she's not ready, we can move to roundtable 2. And I will invite Dr. Maria Teresa Mkenda, the Principal Investment Officer of FFM, to deliver the key talking points of the roundtable 2. So maybe, do we have Marie-Thérèse Agenda or Pierre Brunage for wrap up of the roundtable 3? Pierre, the floor is yours. I think we will begin with the roundtable 3. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I think we will begin with you to get the wrap up of the roundtable 3, and then we will go back to the roundtable 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, really quickly, the salient points with the Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there was a delay on the other platform. Well, the salient points for table 3, as you heard with Munir and all the other participants, which we also brought an example from Burkina Faso. The main point was the need of the finance to be readily available way ahead of the season. You heard of the example of Burkina Faso, they were dealing with the government and how when finance is not available, especially to get LCs, there's no way to bring in the fertilizer on time for farmers. You also heard that because the agro dealers themselves are the last mile and the role they're playing with the farmers in terms of training, knowing when the type of fertilizer they need and when they need it, that finance is key. And training is not just about a one-time activity. There has to be some I would say renewing at particular times for particular crops. So the main ideas and the main discussion was based on the financing, and that we're gonna have to find a way to not only finance the raw materials itself, the fertilizer, but as well capacity building, because it's not just enough, according to what all of them said, it's not just enough for the agro-input dealers to have some money to pay for the fertilizer, but they also need to have funding to build technical assistance for farmers in order to generate yield. So that was the main ideas.
Thank you, Pierre. Maybe I will invite Maria Teresa Mkenda to wrap up on the roundtable 2. Maybe we will move to the wrap up of the roundtable 4. Kilian Bender from AFAP, are you there?
They're probably having issue with the link. Let me see if I could help out.
Yeah. So we are about to jump to the conclusion. We are waiting for the wrap up of the roundtable session 1, 2, and 4, and then we will move to the conclusion. And well, thank you all for being there all the day. We have very fruitful conversation. We spoke about finance for sure, but also about innovation, about technology, about trust, about collaboration. So I hope it will help to develop this collaboration around the fertilizer value chain. So do we have the leader of the wrap-up session, roundtable 1? Sorry, I'm just checking if they have some issue. Sorry, we have some trouble issue with the connection, but I hope we will fix it. They're on their way?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So we have Maria Teresa Mkenda. She will make the wrap up about the roundtable 2.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Karine. The main takeaways from the roundtable. Sorry?
No, it's fine. We can hear you.
Okay, okay. I think it's ahead. Can you hear me now clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, okay, great. So to quote Joseph Mwangangi, the head of Financial Services AFAP,
Please go, we are here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Karine, but for some reason, it's recording well before I have spoken. So I don't know whether now we're in sync.
I hear you well. I think you can go.
Okay, good. Yes, I can.
Yes?
Okay, is this better now?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So to quote Joseph Mwangangi, the head of Financial Services AFAP, the trade guarantee is hinged on trust, and it is on the speed of this trust that trade flows can be enhanced. One of the key findings of our roundtable was the value chain financing is important and is a model that has had success in providing ultimate benefit to the smallholder farmers in terms of access to input and credit financing facilities, in particular for fertilizer. And these facilities include appropriate quality and quantity of produce following the provision of fertilizer, de-risking of the sector, making it more attractive and cheaper based on the structured financing resources, the increase in actual use of input and access to fertilizer, to finance of fertilizer down to the smallholder farmers, guaranteed markets in part for the produce, particularly from off-taker arrangements from private sector players, the provision of crop insurance as part of the financing structures that have been done under specific programs. We also learned that the trade guaranteed program was very timely as it enhanced the provision of credit and the overall turnover increase in SMEs and harbor group dealers, in addition to increasing actual reach of fertilizer to smallholder farmers. It has also provided insights into the existing potential markets and the effect of producing appropriate crops, including the development of export markets and consequently increasing smallholder farmer incomes. It has, in addition, provided a cushion by providing access to credit, particularly where global prices are continuously increasing rapidly. It has enhanced trust between stakeholders in the market and improved the ability of harbor dealers to access credit for longer periods from suppliers. The key financial needs as a result of the trade credit guarantee is because of the increase in stock uptake, there's need for the SMEs to build capacity for their feedstock, therefore supply additional fertilizer to smallholder farmers. And also the increase of global prices will mean that the need for finance will increase significantly because the same proportion of finance would have a reduced effect in terms of the tonnage of fertilizer, noting that fertilizer has increased by almost 100% in some of the product lines. There's also the need to increase financing to build distribution channels and related infrastructure, including storage capacity and vehicles to support transport and distribution. All in all, the key takeaway was the trust that has been built by the trade guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Teresa Mkenda. I hope we have connected with Atsuko Dao for the wrap-up of the Roundtable 1.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I was late. Thank you, Karen. So our roundtable was about public-private partnerships for infrastructure and services required to grow the fertilizer industry, and we had a very rich conversation with the panelists. First of all, with regards to public-private partnerships, there was a conversation around how there is a need for public to understand private. There's also a need for the partnership to happen. And also there is a need to understand that governments need to support local industry to grow. And within that context, some of the mechanisms that were discussed were platforms where public can talk to private. Number two, the conversation highlighted the role of banks and how important that was. The growth of the private sector. So there are a number of SMEs that are growing in the space, but at the same time, those SMEs are many a times linked to a larger player. With regards to the banks, they also mentioned that it is very important for governments, particularly at the stage of production, to provide government orders or government guarantees. And then also in many of the countries where these where the fertilizer industry is growing, there's foreign currency issues. So there is a need also for government sometimes to work with the central banks to provide lines of credit. So that was very interesting. A third area where they felt, the panelists felt in the roundtable, government and public sector support is important, is regional harmonization of standards so that they can actually cross border and look at things in a much more regional perspective. Another idea was also regional entities to put together stocks so that it's, economies of scale could be developed. I think in general, the conversation focused around increasing local production and also fully utilizing local factories. Finally, I'd just like to say everybody felt that as much as policy is important, infrastructure is also very important. And a lot of the cost of fertilizer comes from high transport costs. So really, we need much more investment into infrastructure along economic corridors that can make transport of fertilizer much more affordable. So these were the areas that we discussed. It was really a very rich conversation that outlined the intricate nature of public working with private hand in hand. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Atsuko. Now I will call Kilian Banda from AFAP to wrap up the Roundtable 4. The Roundtable 4 was about diagnostic, assessment of policy and regulatory constraints on financing fertilizer value chains and appraisal of options to resolve constraints and improve performance. So, Kilian Banda, are you with us?
Thank you very much, Chair. Finally, at the last minute, I managed to get through. So basically, I think the Roundtable 4, we had a wealth discussion from Dr. Msola, the country manager of OCP, the gentleman from IFDC, and Dr. Kalinde from Malawi. I think the key messages were summarized as follows. There are the traditional ways of financing fertilizers, which includes the letters of credit, credit guarantees, and a special case for Malawi, they use the collateral management accounts. And one thing also that came up from that roundtable is that most of the supply side importers or manufacturers, they don't have a problem in accessing finance, but the problem comes down as we go down in the distribution phase of the fertilizers. And a pledge was made if more support can be given to the distributors, if AFFM or AFDB can fund such, as well as the introduction of digital mobile inventory systems where farmers are encouraged to do savings. It came out as one of the solutions, particularly in Tanzania, that has improved fertilizer financing at farmers level. Another issue or another point was that harmonization, particularly using the blocks that are there already that has been created, it can also help to reduce the price of fertilizers as it moves from the importers to the farmers. And one point also that was highlighted was if outputs markets have to be supported in such a way that they act as a pump, a sucking pump of the whole system. If there is if the output market is not working profitably, the whole system can collapse. For instance, in Tanzania, the price of maize in the local market is quite low, but if they try to export the maize to another country, some regulatory differences enables that product to go to the next country. And I think there were a few comments or a few questions to the group, which needs some thoughts to discuss beyond this. One is the issue of fertilizer being financed more than once as it moves from the importer to the farmer. I think there is need for a structured finance mechanism that is to be put into place, because when the importer goes out there to the bank, he needs to open a letter of credit. The distributor has to open also some bank guarantee to get the same bag of fertilizer, and the smallholder farmer or farmer has to get credit from the bank to buy the same bag of fertilizer. So there is need for some structured credit. And again, the issue of banks in national banks in all these countries in the continent, they lodge their strategic, they deposit some money, some funds with Reserve Bank, which will be just sitting there, and that could be one way or another that could be used to reduce the cost of financing fertilizers if those funds can be used for financing fertilizers. And yeah, I think that summarizes much of the talk that we had on the round table number 4. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all the panelists who demonstrate that we are facing great challenges, but that with cooperation and knowledge, we can find solutions to improve fertilizer accessibility, usage, and affordability. To conclude the day, it is my great honor to welcome back Vincent Castel, with the Regional Sector Manager, Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank, on stage for the concluding words. Please.
Thank you very much. I represent the director, Martin Frégenet, who is currently traveling. Thank you very much. Honorable Ministers of Agriculture, Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Rural Economy, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment of the African Union, CEOs and Managing Directors of financial institutions and fertilizer company, the African Development Staff. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for this very important initiative of the AFFM in collaboration with the African Fertilizer and Agribusiness Partnership in Africa. The different discussions during this very intense and robust virtual meeting will go a long way in reshaping the fertilizer sector in East and Southern Africa. As already mentioned by Dr. Bess Dunfilm this morning, I will stress that Africa cannot grow nutritious food without utilizing inputs such as seeds, crop protection products, and fertilizer. Our institution would like to take this opportunity to recommit partnering with all actors to address the challenges in the fertilizer sector, namely scarcity and unusual price increases. This is even more important as ministers from Malawi, Rwanda, Uganda, and Zambia all pointed out that their respective fertilizer sectors urgently needs to be supported at different levels. We would like to praise their efforts as they are achieving it's crucial to attaining the bank's Feed Africa strategy. As I said, fertilizer is the fuel to agriculture. To that end, we must do all what we can to avail adequate finance on a timely manner, especially to agro input dealers, at this juncture when prices of fertilizer are rapidly surging. The increase in global prices will require additional finance in local currency to cover the same amount of fertilizer to scale up intervention to cushion farmers from these increases in prices. From the different discussions, representatives from DFIs, commercial banks, fertilizer companies, all identified the lack of affordable capital as one of the main reasons the sector is still lagging in Africa. Therefore, we must design innovating financing solutions to ensure that farmers have affordable fertilizer on time. One of those solutions are the trade guarantees, such as the great program implemented by AFAP and AFFM in Tanzania. The other innovative element to consider is blockchain, which will aid create standards in the sector. Let us remember that the African youth is rapidly growing and expected to double to over 830 million by 2050. It is the adequate time for companies to train the youth to become experts in agri-inputs production, distribution, and extension agents to overcome the last mile challenges associated with the use of fertilizer. Some of the youth will become interested in using drones to determine farm size for our smallholder farmers, tractors, and artificial intelligence for precision farming. They will also use advanced technologies to detect fraudulent agri-inputs and apply the right quantity of fertilizer at the right time. All actors should work together to avail sustainable financing to invest in logistics, farmer skills to unlock the fertilizer value chain. We commend the work of OCP Africa, ETG, AFAP, ABSA, Kenya, Bank of Kigali, which are already doing to set up a robust ecosystem with financial partners and farmers to support the agricultural sector through specific projects. Participants have also raised the need to de-risk farming activities using various interventions, starting from access to high-quality agro-input materials, agronomy support throughout the year, crop insurance, and direct access to off-takers to secure the highest price possible. This may unlock opportunities for commercial banks and other private actors. To be ready to address all these challenges related to the financing of the sector in the region, we urge all participants to implement the following key recommendations to support the sector. Support the fertilizer demand and supply in Africa. The demand must be stimulated while focusing on production. There is a need to ensure that farmers can effectively get access to the fertilizer produced. Address the issues related to the demand at regional level. Countries in Africa should consider pulling out their investments to produce more. Scaling up efforts at regional level could boost production and access fertilizer. Third, scale up financing. Development finance institutions should provide more support to local banks to create more lines of credits dedicated to agri-inputs. Fourth, to set up risk-sharing facilities. Such facilities will accelerate lending to SMEs and smallholder farmers. They will also help increase funding limits to these actors. Adopt a holistic approach to the value chain is the fifth recommendation. Securing partnerships with agro-processing companies can help guarantee offtake. Implementing the above will put our continent on the right track towards zero hunger, and as Marie-Claire rightly said, put more smiles on the farmer's face. I am convinced that together we will turn all this into a reality. Thank you very much for your participation today and for making this event a success. Marie-Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vincent.
Thank you, Vincent Castel. Thank you all for being part of the East and Southern Africa Fertilizer Financing Forum and for those very insightful discussions around strengthening regional collaboration to finance fertilizer in the agribusiness value chain. We have learned a lot today. Concrete commitments must follow today's forum. We count on you all. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank the organizer, IFFM, IFDB, AFAP, and AFRICOM, and ICT team and interpreters that facilitated the forum. Please do apologize for small technical issues we had. It has been a pleasure to be your host. Thank you, goodbye, and have a lovely end of the day.
Thank you.